Okay. Can you see this presentation?
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay. So let's start with welcoming the inner magician. And this is our final class. So I'm sad about it, but maybe we can do more in the coming year. But I wanted to just end this series of our work together, just looking forward specifically at this like kind of archetypal invitation we're getting into 2026, which the numerology adds up to 10, and then we reduce that to 1. And that means we're moving into this magician year, which is really cool.
Hmm.
Magician is card number 1 in the Major Arcana, as we know, and it represents the archetype of what we often refer to as just conscious creation and manifestation, things like that. So if this past year has felt like it's been happening to you on some level, that's because we've been in a hermit year, and this year of the magician really invites us to generate our power, right? To have more of an impact on our environment and in our world, and to have that agency that we want to have in our lives. So we're leaving the hermit year of 2025, and we know that the hermit archetype is about solitude as a spiritual practice and not loneliness. The lantern, we talked about seeking truth in the dark, is one kind of way we can look at that. We see that he's standing on a mountaintop and gaining perspective through distance, which we know we love to do. And that's what we do with the tarot. And this inner authority developed through introspection. So, really going inward to become the authority on what we think and feel and believe in the world. And then going back out into the world so that when we do that, the influence is filtered through our own values and our own ideas. And then this idea of wisdom earned through questioning, not just accepting. So, really asking the big questions, critically thinking. We know the hermit's a teacher, right? He's in that top row of the tableau that we did. And so, what the hermit year asked of us is to turn away from external validation, really, to stop looking outward and go inward to figure out what we think and need. To sit with what we don't know, to develop our inner compass, to be willing to be misunderstood so we can learn, and to prioritize depth over breadth. So let's take a minute to look at what did the hermit teach us in 2025 that's informing what we're being asked to create in 2026. So the first prompt, what did 2025 teach me about myself that I didn't know before? So get out your journal and let's just spend a couple minutes doing this reflection so we kind of know where we're coming from, right? We want to always know, be grounded in what we're coming from. So we can think about with this, what truths did you discover in solitude this past year, if you were able to do that? What beliefs did you question or discard? What parts of yourself did you meet for the first time? Did you kind of bring forth with your inner work? And what became clear when you stopped listening to everybody else? So give yourself a minute to answer that question. Okay, and then if we move into the next question, what wisdom from the Hermit year am I carrying into the Magician year? So this we might think about what what did you learn that's non-negotiable for you this past year? Like what are your kind of bottom lines? And what inner compass did you develop? Like what guides you now in your life? What boundaries or standards did you clarify, and what values crystallized during your time in the Hermit year? Those are just sub prompts. You don't have to answer all those, but just to kind of give you an idea of what kind of wisdom we're looking for. Okay, and then the next prompt, what needs to stay on the mountain? What am I ready to leave behind as I transition into this year of the Magician? Okay, and then our prompt 4, your hermit informed intention, which is based on what the hermit taught you. What is the magician being called to create? This is kind of the bridge between your inner work from 2025 to your outer work in 2026. So anything that you've been harvesting inside is now going, this is the year that it's going to manifest. So if the hermit clarified kind of your values and your boundaries and your, the inner needs that you have, how can the magician build on that? Maybe the hermit showed us, really like what matters to us, what's most important. And when we know that, then maybe we can make more commitments, because we're clear. So this should have been a year of a lot of clarity so that coming into the new year, we can really make some magic. Okay, when you're ready, we're going to do this little 2-card pull with our deck. So you can keep the Hermit and the Magician out as your significator cards. And we're going to ask 2 questions, one for each card. So go ahead and make sure your cards are well shuffled. So put out our two cards in whatever order you want in front of you. And then when you're ready, you can pull your cards one and two side by side, face down, and then flipped. When you're ready, you'll flip card one and answer the question, what wisdom, insight, or clarity did I gain in 2025 that I need to remember? What can this card show us? And whenever you're ready, you can move on to your second card. Magician's work. How do I take that gift and create something with it in 2026? So the hermit really offered us, these inner gifts or this wisdom, and the magician again is going to help us bring it into the world with agency. So your second card is going to speak a little more to maybe what will your outward self look like in the coming year, and how can this card help you with that or give you any insight? Maybe you're embodying the card. We're really saying like I'm not the same person, right? A year ago. I learned something and now I'm going to do something with what I learned. Okay. All right. So let's talk a little bit about the magician, which we did talk about when we did our major arcana. So we're entering this year, and we see with the card that most importantly, the stance as above, so below, which is the hermetic kind of teaching that we have everything that happens in the universe is reflected in us, and everything in us is reflected in the universe. And we have this incredible, again, this agency to create this higher consciousness and then bring that back down into some kind of manifestation in the world. And that could look like something we're creating, or it could be just a way of being. So we might gain consciousness about how we're acting or how we're being treated, and then we enact that in the world. Like, for example, we might manifest better boundaries. So it can be used in a lot of different ways. And I know that you guys have been doing a lot of work around that. We have the snake around the magician's belt, which we talked about. The Ouroboros is reminding us that what we create feeds back into us. We're in a loop with reality. It's also that saying that there's a beginning in every ending. And so again, this cyclical thinking, right? Not being linear about our lives, but understanding that we're always in some kind of cycle, coming into the new. Like my card that I pulled for the 2 card pull was the World card, and that very much represents that, because the world is taking us back to the Fool, right? So for me, I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense. I'm entering into this new cycle. The table has the 4 tools: the wand, the sword, the cup, and the pentacle, representing obviously all these resources that we have. And the magician doesn't really like ask for tools. The tools exist, and so they're right there. And that's the same within us as well, representing that we always have all of these things inside of us. We don't need to search for them. They're there. It's really a matter of using them. And we know that the wand correlates with desire and passion and fire. The sword is air, which usually is communication or mental thinking. The cup is water, and that's going to be our emotions and our relational experiences. And then the pentacles are earth, which is really our abundance, our lived experience, our homes, our routines, things that, again, are very much of the earth. We have the infinity symbol above the magician's head, which is the figure 8. It speaks to our unlimited potential when we align with our creative power, when we're really in our highest consciousness. And then the red robe and white flowers is passion meeting purity of purpose. Again, like, how can we really bring this idea of our deepest desires and passion and be pure and authentic and committed to those? So when we think about the magician, we think about our intentions for the new year becoming reality this year. They're not just like, I think it's so easy to set like arbitrary intentions when we get to the end of the year. But I think let's make our intentions things that we actually can bring to fruition, not just hopes and wishes, because the magician doesn't just wish on a star, right? It's much more serious work when we're really doing magician work. And then if we look at more of the psychological archetype of the magician, so this is the archetype that says, I can affect my environment, I can make things happen, right? I have power. Again, it's that agency. And interestingly, that sense of agency really starts when you're like 3 years old, when you start to realize there's a me and there's other people. It might even start younger, because even when we're really little and we're like, nonverbal, like babies, we're still seeing our impact on the world through crying, right? We cry, and then we see, do I have impact? Does someone come when I cry? So this idea of I have impact and I can make my world what I want and I can have impact on other people starts really, really early. and it's a developmental phase. And so sometimes if we grow up in situations where we don't have impact, we can end up with a wound there. And the magician is there to help us heal that wound on a big level. So in our consciousness, we want to be clear about our intention. We want to always have be aware that we have conscious choice or be in our consciousness when we're choosing. We want to have directed awareness, not just random awareness, purpose and vision. So it's also, the magician is also ruled by Mercury, right? So Mercury is the planet of quickness, of communication. And so it's really, the magician really reminds us not only that we have this manifestation and this higher consciousness that we're drawing from, but also that we have these incredible tools, the sword being one of them, right? And then we have action, grounded work, using what is material engagement, real world present. So how are we showing up with all of this work that we've been doing? How are we really what's it gonna look like when we move through the world as the magician? And that's something you can continue to journal about. Like when you're in your magician self, what do other people experience in you? So we have conscious creation, intention, and action equals transformation. All right. Then we have to also always talk about the shadow, right? The magician shadow can show up as manipulation, and this can be external or internal. Obviously, like this could happen to us as much as we could be manipulating and not realize it. The more powerful we become, the more mindful we have to become of our shadow. So when we use our power to control situations or other people instead of like co-creating or being more democratic, that's a shadow of the magician. When we're in illusion, right? When we're confusing kind of, our esoteric practices or our visualizations, our spirituality is not grounded in reality, that is spiritual bypassing, right? If we're not walking the walk and talking the walk, not walking the walk and talking the talk, we're like not able to really be the magician. And we see this with the high priestess too, that sometimes people are like, oh, I'm the high priestess, but they're not really doing the deeper work. We could have scattered energy trying to do all these things without focus and intention, just like literally like waving our wand around, hoping that it lands somewhere. So we really, when we do magic, we always want to be very ritualistic, very intentional. So when you do your tarot cards this is like one of the reminders of working with the tarot, is we want to set ourselves up, right? Light a candle, light incense, like take time, because energy, when it's directed, is way more powerful than scattered energy. And then we have this Mercury trickster energy, being slick and performative, but not substantive. So we could maybe get into this like imposter kind of way of being. So the balanced magician knows I have power and I use it responsibly. I create with reality, not in denial of it, right? There's no illusion there. I'm not just walking around thinking I'm a magician without actually grounding in how that's manifesting in my life. So the goal is to activate your energy while staying grounded and in right relationship with what is. Okay, so now we're going to do a more formal spread. So I'm going to keep my significator cards out. You guys can do whatever you want. I don't like to have these in when they're the cards I'm working with, but if you want them to come up in your spread, you can put them back in. I'll leave that up to you. So give your cards a good shuffle again and just kind of look through these questions and what we're going to be pulling, and kind of center yourself around the magician's table spread. So we're going to be working with our wand, our cup, our sword, and our pentacles, and letting that guide us to this like intention card of what we're ultimately hoping to create in 2026. Maybe take some deep breaths, ground yourself, connect with your cards. amazing how meditative shuffling can be. Just like really does ground you when you start to do that with your hands. Let me just, so I can see you guys close that out. And then when you're ready, create some space for yourself. And I'm going to just talk you through some of these placements and what we're doing here. So you'll have you could put your significator cards up top, just, or off to the side, wherever you can visibly see them. And then in position 1, and you can lay these down face down for now. So position 1 is your creative fire, right? What passion, what creative energy, what inspiration are you bringing into 2026? So this isn't about like what you feel like you should be passionate about. It's about what's actually alive in you, what wants to burn, what wants to be expressed, what vision is calling you. It's showing you where your fire needs tending. Position 2 is going to be your emotional wisdom. What emotional capacity, what relational knowing, what heart intelligence do you carry? This might show you what you've learned through relationships, right? Through grief, through love. It might show you your capacity for feeling or empathy or connection. And then we have position 3. This is the sword, your mental clarity. What truth are you ready to speak? What mental clarity do you possess? What do you know at this point in your life? And when you say no, like no, right? Like no for sure. This might be intellectual discernment. It might be boundaries. Might be a new perspective you learned. This is where you're clear. This is like, where are you sharp? What do you know for sure? What's uncompromising for you in that way? And then 4, the bottom are pentacles. Your embodied resources, what tangible resources, what embodied practices, what material foundation grounds you. This could be money, skills, work, your body's health. It could also be meditation, movement, anything you're doing for your body, ritual. Think about what's real, what you can touch, what supports your physical existence. And then in the center, we're going to put our 5 card, which is what we're called to create this year. So this could be, again, literal. It could be a project, a new job, a relationship. Or it could be, more a new way of being or a shift in consciousness or something that you're wanting to change in yourself or bring forward in yourself. So this is the bridge between, the 5th card is going to be our bridge between the current year and the coming year. So go ahead and flip those over, and I'm going to give you some good time here to do this. I'll probably give you maybe like 10 minutes. So go ahead and do that. I'm going to mute myself. Okay, and when you guys are ready, just let me know.
I'm ready.
Okay, so next we're going to go to this intention setting and integration part, which is going to build on your previous journaling that you just did. So, um, based on really like what's on your table, right? These four suits. And I kind of made like a little thing at the bottom of my journaling of what my resources were with fire, air, water, and earth, just to clarify from what. So if that's something you want to do, but you don't have to. So we're going to now look at what is actually possible for me in 2026. What would it look like to approach this year as the magician with consciousness and grounded action rather than as something you're hoping and wishing and waiting for things to change? And then what's one intention I want to carry forward? So not 10, just one. We're going to pick one, which is kind of, crazy to think. And let's remember this formula: conscious intention plus grounded action equals creation. So just take a couple of minutes to bring forward what you were journaling about and see if you can get a little more clear. And then we're going to even clarify it more. Um, but this will kind of bring it all into one statement. Okay, and then when you're done with that, we're going to create a magician phrase. So, a short phrase you can return to when you kind of forget you're a magician, which I think we all do to some degree. So, these are phrases that you could maybe keep close by, reminding you that, you have everything you need, working with what's on my table, revisiting what's on your table at any given time. I mean, that's a very beautiful spread, I think, to do regularly. It's just pulling out the 4 tools on the magician's table and doing a little spread on those and checking in with where am I. Even that spread that we did, you could do that, every couple months just to see if you're on track. And my where does my magical power come from? Because I think sometimes we forget where we're drawing our power from, and it's easy to kind of just look at the magician and be like, oh, it just comes from up there, but it comes from so many places. It comes from our ability to communicate. It comes from our ability to see both sides of a situation. It comes from our confidence. So, lots of different things we can think about. So, take a couple minutes to come up with a short phrase, and it can be all 3 or it could be your own. You could even start it with something like, as a magician, if you want to do something like that. Okay. And then I just wanted to spend some time with just some reminders about the tarot because it is our last class, and we did a lot. We looked at the major arcana, we looked at the court cards, we looked at the suits, we did spreads, we talked about the elements and the symbolism and what an archetype is. So you've been given a lot of information, but I want to just remind you that you're not leaving here without some really, really powerful tools that you have gained, not only just through like learning about the tarot, but I would imagine learning about yourself and your relationship with the tarot, which is the most important thing. It's not so much about how much knowledge you gained or what an expert you are in reading, because if you want to be a tarot reader, that you can go get that training and do that. But more importantly, we're moving into this new year that is really inviting us to step into our power, right, in a really big way. And we know that the world needs that in a very big way. And we know, just like we talked about, that it's not enough just to have intentions or to dilly-dally. I mean, we can use these tools for our personal growth and all of those things, but at the end of the day, and I think this year speaks to this a lot, when we make the conscious choice to live as a magician, and this is a very good year to define what that looks like for you, that's, I think, when the big change happens, because the magician is the most, in my mind, is the most powerful card in the deck. For a lot of reasons. But I think the most important is that it shows us that we have free will, that we, again, can have impact. And that impact can be negative or positive, right? Like we could have a lot of impact and do harm, even as a magician. So we want to be in 100% pure light all of the time as much as we can. We want to be like I said, when we're doing ritual around tarot, we want to be working with our guides. We want to make sure we're working in light. We want to keep our cards clean. Like there's this level of responsibility in spirituality, and in my mind, in psychology and in esoteric practices where we have integrity in our work. So I hope that this year invites you to step even more into that with what you know about the tarot. So these are just some of the things that I want you to remember, that the tarot is a mirror, not a fortune teller, right? The cards reflect what's already in your psyche. So when you're looking at cards, you're assigning meaning to them. They are not assigning meaning to you. So whatever, it's literally you're projecting onto them with your current experience. And so just think of it as a mirror when you're working with them. Remember that the challenging cards, like, sometimes the devil or the death card can be our challenging cards that they show us really like where our attention is needed. They're not there to condemn us or to scare us or to, again, predict anything. It's really more about like, oh, like, is there something I'm not seeing? A lot of the times those cards take us into the darkness or our shadow work. And so you can, when they pop up, that's a gift, right? That there's something we're not seeing. Remember, you're the expert on your life. So no guidebook, no cards know better than you. No one's interpretation of the cards know better. They don't know any more than you do. Anyone who's written a book on tarot, it's intellectual, it's objective, right? It's a great way to like get our juices flowing, but please don't rely on books or, if you get a new deck, it's okay to familiarize yourself with the booklet that comes, but really trust your own instincts. Remember that integration takes time, so don't rush to figure things out. Let the meanings emerge for you over days, right? So you might pull a card and, have it with you in, for days, and it'll pop up like 5 days later. You'll get an aha moment or an insight that comes from that card. The cards don't decide for you. They illuminate and reflect, but you make the choices. So it supports our agency. It doesn't replace it, right? It's not telling us what to do. Again, we're not looking at it divinically. And then just remember, practice does not make perfect. So use your cards every day in some way. Not necessarily to become an expert, but just to stay connected to them, because a lot of times we'll just stick them aside and we won't touch them for weeks on